Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today for the third installment of the Birch Project's 10 training modules on supporting youth in schools and in the community, trainings for paraprofessionals and mentors. This module is titled Engagement Strategies at Tier 1. If you tuned into our first two modules, Module 1, Reviewing Public Health Approaches, and Module 2, Understanding Behaviors, you will have some foundational information that this module will build on. And if you have not yet had the opportunity to check those modules out, we will review some here, but I encourage you to complete those as well to make sure that you're set up for success with engagement at the Tier 1 level. Before beginning with our content, I would like to introduce the Birch Project to those of you just joining us for the first time for these module series. The Birch Project is a behavioral health integrated resources for children's project. Its mission is to provide professional development and resources for schools, as well as to strengthen coordination of behavioral health supports across schools and community agencies. The Birch Project is led by faculty members from UMass Boston and UMass Amherst and is sponsored by Boston Children's Hospital. For more information, please check out our website at umb.edu/birch. My name is Whitney Walker, and I am a recent graduate from the school psychology program at UMass Boston. Majority of my research has involved improving the behavioral health systems for students, and I'm excited to be here to present this module today. So we would like to extend a huge thank you to all the paraprofessionals and mentors who made these modules possible. They provided us with invaluable insight into the work that they do, which helped us to develop the module you're about to view. The learning objectives for this module are for participants to 1, have a better understanding of what universal prevention is and what it is not. Second, we aim to have participants gain an understanding of the prevention, teach, and reinforce framework and strategies for each. And finally, we are hoping participants will learn steps to use in delivering effective directions. In order to accomplish those learning objectives, today we will have 5 major segments of this module. First, we will learn about what prevention in general is and why it is important. Next, we will go through the prevent, teach, and reinforce framework. And following the understanding of the framework, we will take a deeper dive into the strategies for prevention, teaching, and reinforcement. And then finally, we'll wrap up with giving effective directions and going through what effective directions looks like. As I mentioned before, I want to take a minute here to review some of the information that was covered in the previous modules. Overall, in the first module, we learned about public health approaches, including PBIS and MTSS frameworks. We also learned about the prevention, teach, and reinforce model in more depth than we will get into in this module. From there, in the second module, we learned that first, behavior is learned, predictable, and communicates a need that often results in some type of consequence or reaction. Every behavior has a consequence, which is not necessarily negative. Second, we learned that behaviors can be impacted by prevention and intervention strategies that are determined by the escalation cycle. With knowledge of the escalation cycle and appropriate strategies, we're able to impact behaviors. And finally, trauma-focused and culturally responsive practice informs our understanding of behavior and development. This is something I want everyone to keep in mind as we're going through the material today. How are we being trauma-focused and culturally responsive in our practices at the Tier 1 level? And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So first, we will start exploring prevention. As a reminder, we want to make sure our youth's basic needs, such as food and housing, are being met to make sure that that's not getting in the way of their learning and their friendships. Module 1 addresses the hierarchy of needs in more detail. Depending on your role and responsibilities at your school or agency, we recommend connecting with your supervisor in, or the individual who connects families with resources if you do have concerns about a child's basic needs being met. Module 1 also includes some resources you can share with your families around basic needs if that's within your job responsibilities. And also, as always, if you have a concern about a child's safety, speak to your supervisor as soon as possible and never leave the day without sharing that concern with your supervisor. So, why is building relationships so important? Think about why we might start a section on prevention with a slide about the importance of building relationships. Well, relationships are a critical prevention strategy. Building a connection and relationship with another person helps to inform your practice with that person, whether a youth or adult. When you know someone better and there's a mutual trust and respect built in the relationship, it becomes easier to learn what is helpful, what's unhelpful, offensive, or even triggering for that person. We can learn about the strengths of youth and their families and build off of them in our interactions and plans to support the youth. Get to know the youth, get to know who the youth goes to for supports at home or in the community. Are they connected to a team or an after school program or another mentor? What do they do for fun? What and who matters to them? All of this information allows you to make decisions that are culturally responsive and trauma informed. The bottom line is that when a child has a stable and supportive relationship with caregivers, such as yourself, their outcomes are better in life. Relationships deeply matter and foster resiliency and are protective factors for youth. Even if a youth does not have a stable and positive relationships at home or in the community, their relationship with staff at school can make a huge difference in their lives. As we go through these slides, keep in mind these questions about culturally responsive and trauma-informed practices. And think about, what are you doing at your school that align, or maybe that needs some support around it to ensure the practices are culturally responsive and trauma-informed. So let's remember to ask ourselves, how can you individualize practices for your population? How can you make sure that what you're doing is relevant to your students? Are you checking your own biases? And are you comfortable and confident in the decisions that you're making? So we know that building relationships is the first prevention strategy, but what exactly are prevention strategies? Prevention strategies are used to keep others from engaging in challenging behaviors that can negatively impact themselves or others. It's a proactive process that empowers individuals and systems to create positive climates for pro-social behaviors. Prevention is not reactive. Prevention can look like setting up an environment in a logical manner that will prevent challenging behaviors and promote more positive climates. Possibly the order in which you have students line up, or how a seating chart is arranged, setting clear expectations, and using pre-corrections are all useful strategies for prevention before challenging behaviors occur. Next, we have teaching. And teaching is causing someone to learn or understand something by example or experience. It is also showing or explaining to someone how to do something. Reprimanding students is not teaching them. That is reactive instead of preventative. Remind the students what to do when they have not followed instructions, or are presenting with challenging behaviors in order to teach them. Reinforcement. So finally, we have reinforcing after preventing and teaching. Reinforcement is any response that increases the likelihood that a student will engage in that behavior again. In the previous module, we talked about the functions of behavior, and here are some examples of functions of behavior and how they are reinforcing that behavior. So with the behavior of avoiding or escaping a task, the student will be reinforced by delaying or getting out of something that they don't want to do or that's difficult for them. With the function of behavior as attention, the student will be reinforced by the interactions with an adult or peer and get that need met from, or get the need of attention met. When the function is to gain access to something, they are reinforced by getting the object they desired or needed. And finally, the automatic reinforcement comes from feeling better from this behavior. So, for example, that could be a student who gets anxious in crowded places and therefore runs out of the classroom when feeling overwhelmed. Each of these functions of behavior are reinforced when the need is met. We are hoping to get those needs met with pro-social behaviors and intervention strategies that encourage the pro-social behaviors. So that brings us to the prevent, teach, and reinforce framework. In this section, we will go through the framework and the strategies listed under each item, keeping in mind that the strategies are focusing on tier 1 for this module. However, the prevent, teach, and reinforce framework can be applied to all tiers. So for now, we'll focus on a universal tier 1 level that applies to working with all students across all settings. So prevention. An important strategy for prevention is modeling. Modeling is demonstrating a skill or having a peer demonstrate a skill. In doing so, you will do it for them, then you want them to do it with you, and then you'll cheer them on while they do it on their own. Here's an example of how this could be used in a classroom setting. You would say, Rebecca, can you remind Ben and I what we should be doing right now? We forgot. You can also ask another student to teach you, or another student teach you or another student the material or skill. Then the next step would be to have your student teach you or another student the material or skill. The next strategy is pre-corrections. This strategy is basically getting in front of the problem behavior. You can accomplish this by explaining the expected behavior before starting a task or entering a new setting. In attempt of creating a positive environment, we want to focus on the appropriate behavior. So for example, you might say, all right, Leo, we're headed to lunch. I know you're going to be awesome walking quietly down the hall, making sure that you set the expectation before entering the hallway. Additionally, using visual schedules can help the students see what's coming next, as well as having a reference to look at throughout the day. I encourage you all to think about how these strategies might apply to work with older students, and how might pre-corrections be individualized for to meet a student's needs. What would an adaptation of this look like in your school or agency to make it more culturally responsive? We spoke a little bit about this earlier, but environmental modifications can be one of the best prevention strategies. For this strategy, I want us to look at this case example. A local school had a high office disciplinary referral rate during recess. The PBIS team thought they needed to completely reteach and make a new plan to reduce referrals. The counselor went outside to observe recess and realized that the soccer net was broken. Once the soccer net was fixed, the referrals dropped instantly. So what are some challenges you see at your school that may be alleviated by environmental modifications? Think about, how is the lunchroom set up? Where are the high traffic areas? How about recess? What are the boundaries? What kind of equipment is available? These are types of modifications that may not take long to change and can create a more positive climate in your school altogether. Asking youth their input can be really helpful around how to make these changes to better meet their needs. Let's take a look at some examples in different settings. The bus. How might the role of no eating or drinking on the bus be triggering for a student with trauma or neglect history? And how could that be modified? Some students may not have access to food readily, and eating on the bus may be one of their only options. One modification that could be made for the bus could be, how can we make sure we clean up after ourselves after we eat? The hallway. How might having students line up to transition in the hallway by gender be triggering for non-binary students? And how could this be modified? If a student identifies as non-binary, forcing them to choose a gender in order to line up could lead to distress and potentially challenging behavior subsequently. Instead, not requiring them to line up by gender and maybe by birthday instead could avoid potential distress. Additionally, active supervision strategies can include move, scan, and interact. When identifying trouble spots, you want to move there more frequently. However, you don't want students to be able to gauge when you're going to be in that area. It should be unpredictable. You want to make sure that you're scanning the area frequently and intentionally. And you want to interact with the students while moving around and scanning. When interacting, keep interactions short in order to interact with most students. Use behavior-specific language when recognizing students, and use pre-corrections to support positive behaviors and focusing on the appropriate behaviors. Now, this isn't always easy. What can active supervision and what can make active supervision and interactions difficult? It could be things like when a student is having a difficult time, you can have them walk around with you. When you are tired throughout or because of the rest of your day, whatever happened previously in that day, maybe when you're short staffed, all of these things can play into how this can be really challenging to be constantly moving, scanning, and interacting. You also want to take into consideration proximity when interacting with the students. You want to be close and interact, increase relational conversation, and really building those relationships with youth. Again, this will help to inform the intervention strategies in ways that are culturally responsive and trauma informed. And when interacting with a group, there are several ways to get their attention. There's the clap once and then they clap twice, a call and response, which could be something that you all make up as a group or something that you've decided and taught also to the students. Counting is a common strategy that's used with younger kids. Praising students following instructions. And this strategy goes back to focusing on the appropriate behavior and using those students as models for the others. And standing in a designated place. When using this strategy, be sure that the expectation is understood and that pre-correction is taught. Now, it can be challenging to engage and maintain the attention of one person, let alone multiple children. So here are a couple of resources that we put together for you to use to gather students in group settings to help engage them. So this brings us to the prevention portion of Prevent, Teach, and Reinforce framework. We are moving on to the fourth section of teaching. When teaching, you want to first leave opportunities for students to respond. You will be validating the student by showing understanding of their emotions and stating expected behaviors when you are teaching. Additionally, when giving redirections, use a neutral tone. We don't want to reprimand, we want to focus on the appropriate behavior and teach. So, for example, one might say, Ricky and Leo, I know it's tempting to jump into the snowbanks. How about we play tag instead? In this example, you're validating their experience, yet redirecting them to choose another activity. Interacting with the youth is a part of teaching strategies as well. When interacting with the youth, teaching can be a way of building the trust and relationship. This can help you to create a safe environment for the kids. So teaching behavior-specific praise. When interacting, it is important to use behavior-specific praise. You can make a comment indicating your approval of the specific behavior, like, Joe, thanks for putting your tray away and cleaning up your area. Or, Maria, you played so nicely today. Thank you for including others. Can you think of any other examples? Sometimes kids prefer nonverbal praise in writing or in private instead of in front of their peers whenever that's possible. Because we're aiming to be culturally responsive and trauma informed in our practice, what are some ways that we can meet students' needs who would prefer an alternative means of praise? We could use a thumbs up, or writing a note, or telling them in private or after class. So finally, we have the reinforcement portion of the framework. So we went over what reinforcement was at the beginning of the module, but reinforcement is providing a desired item or activity as a result of a student meeting expectations, which increases the likelihood of the behavior happening again. So the functions of behavior that we went over earlier, the avoid and escape, attention, gaining access, or automatic reinforcement, are all fulfilling a need that is being reinforced by what happens afterwards. Some additional examples of positive reinforcements that have been proven to be successful are stickers, high fives, pre-COVID times, extra time with a desired task, and preference assignments. These reinforcements do not need to be expensive or involved, but reinforce positive behaviors that help to prevent any challenging behaviors. These reinforcements should be individualized for a specific student or group of kids, making it culturally responsive and trauma-informed. We know sometimes our backgrounds impact what we think about reinforcing behaviors children are expected to do. However, if we think more about this, we know, excuse me, we know we're all reinforced in our daily lives in different ways for meeting expectations. We know all humans feel better and are more likely to contribute positively when they are reinforced and appreciated for their efforts. So within this framework, I would like to reiterate the importance of focusing on the positive behaviors to prevent the challenging ones. This can be done across all settings, not just in classrooms. So to do so, teach the expectation and routines, and this may include a visual schedule. Supervise this space by scanning, moving, and interacting with the students. Pre-correct student behavior, again, focusing on the appropriate behavior and not inappropriate behaviors, and positively reinforcing the pro-social behaviors. When setting the stage of any environment with these prevention strategies, a more positive climate can be created. Although this feels like more effort and time, it will help prevent more crisis situations that take a great deal of time and energy for all people involved. The last portion of our content for this module is about giving effective directions. There are 5 guidelines to follow when giving effective directions. 1, make sure that what you are saying is positive and specific and positively stated. 2, make sure the directions are developmentally appropriate. It's important to understand your audience and that age is not the only determining factor for appropriateness, making sure to take into consideration the entire student, and that will allow us to be culturally responsive and trauma informed as well. 3, giving directions one at a time, regardless of the developmental levels. When directions are more clear when they are given step by step. 4, wait 5 seconds after giving a direction. It often takes us as adults 5 seconds or more to comply with a staff meeting, to comply at a staff meeting or within a direction, with a direction in the community. So for example, when you are asked to move your location to make room for another person. 5, give out specific praise when you see someone following a request. So following these guidelines leads to more effective, safer, and more positive interactions. So which of these is a more effective way to give directions? Saying, okay, lunch is over, or okay, everyone, lunch is over, which means you can put your trays away and line up by the door. The second option is correct. It is more specific about the expectation for what the kids should be doing because lunch is over. Is saying, Theo, it is lunchtime, so you are expected to eat your food. Take a few bites and then tell your friends your story. Effective or not effective? This is effective because you are specifically and positively explaining the directions one at a time to Theo at a developmental level that is appropriate. Is saying, Ricardo, stop bouncing in line. Please act like a second grader. Effective or not effective? This is not effective. What might be a more effective way of giving these directions? One might say, Ricardo, please stand still in line so we can make our bodies safe. This way, the direction of standing still is specifically and positively stated and focusing on the appropriate behavior. What if you say, okay, class, we have lots of instructions, so please listen carefully. First, please clean up your art supplies. Second, take your math out of your backpack. And third, please sit down with your listening ears on. Is that effective or not effective? That is not effective because there are too many directions given at one time. This can be improved by giving each of these directions one step at a time and following it up with a 5-second wait period. If you need to give multiple directions at once, write them down or provide a list and go through them one by one verbally. So the next few slides will be a multiple choice or true and false pop quiz. Which of the following best describes prevention? Miss Martin knows that Ronaldo feels uncomfortable around Peter and Leo, so he has them all sit together to work it out. B, Mr. Lee knows that Allie has difficulty paying attention in class if she does not know the schedule, so he provides Allie with a schedule that she can carry around. C, Instructor Smith provides a motivational quote at the beginning of every school day. Or D, Principal Joseph provided the school with an important and expensive professional development about kindness. The correct answer is B. Mr. Lee knows that Allie uh, has difficulty paying attention in class if she does not know the schedule, so he provides Allie with a schedule that she can carry around. Giving Allie a schedule will allow her to reference it when needed, and therefore she is able to better pay attention and stay on task. Next, Miss Laling thoroughly explained the process of ordering food in the cafeteria. She broke down each step and also made corresponding posters. This best describes which of the following: A, prevention, B, teaching, C, reinforcement, or D, none of the above. The correct answer is A. In giving effective directions, Ms. Laling breaks down each step and breaks down each step and creating visuals for these directions. Students have a clear understanding of the expectation of what they are supposed to do when they are ordering food in the cafeteria. Next, when Ralph completes 3 math problems, he is provided with a sticker. This best describes which of the following terms: A, prevention, B, teaching, C, reinforcement, or D, none of the above. The correct answer is C. The action of giving Ralph a sticker is reinforcing the behavior of completing his math problems, increasing the likelihood of him doing this again. Next, Linda, thank you for keeping all of the chair legs on the floor. You are keeping yourself and your classmates safe. This is an example of behavior-specific praise. True or false? The answer is A. This is true because they pointed out the exact behavior that Linda displayed and the behavior was positive. Giving effective directions should be politely stated and specific. A, true, B, false. The correct answer is A, true. This is true to focus on appropriate behaviors and what exactly it is that should be done. Okay, one more scenario. After the teacher gives instructions, the students have independent work time. Even though Ben has a grasp on the material, he immediately calls you over for help. When you are not present, he will not complete his work. What would you do? So there are many options of what someone can do in this situation. One option would be to instruct Ben to complete a portion of his work and reinforce the behavior with a sticker upon completion. Then instruct him to complete another portion of his work for another sticker while you're helping other students and leave him alone to work independently. Another option would be to tell him that you will sit with him to do a portion of the work and then come back to sit with him after he's done completing a portion independently. So, as we conclude with this learning module, I want to reiterate the 3 big takeaways from this that I'm hoping you all take away. First, prevention is a proactive process that empowers individuals and systems. Second, reinforcement is any response that increases the likelihood that a student will engage in that behavior again. And finally, Giving effective directions can increase safe pro-social behaviors and improve academic behaviors. Keeping these Keeping these in mind will help you to create a positive learning environment for everyone. Here are a couple of additional resources around building relationships, effective mentoring, supporting adaptive behaviors, and social and emotional learning. And here are the references used for this presentation. And finally, we want to thank you for attending the third module. Please complete the evaluation form through this link on this slide, and we would love to hear your feedback. And you can visit us at our website, www.umb.edu/birch, where you can also sign up for our subscription list to get more information on best practices related to supporting the behavioral health needs and well-being of youth. We would love to hear from you. Please reach out to us with thoughts or questions. And thank you all for all that you do to support the youth in schools and communities. It's difficult work, and we're grateful to have you.